Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Deku Made a Robot. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe, and share the video. It really helps me out. I did not write the story. The original writer is Kayadon. Please go support them. Before we start, please tell me in the comments section which voice is better, this one or the last one. Now let us dive in. Hey, are you okay? Achiko asked. School had ended a while ago and the two had decided to hang out at a ramen shop. However, the whole time Sukue seemed down. I fucked up. Sukue sighed. Was it about what you did to Bakugo during class? Achiko asked, having a strong feeling that was the case. 'Cause you kinda went a little too far. Well, actually you went way too far. I know. Sukue groaned. Dad said he was disappointed in me. Achiko cringed. There were very few times she ever disappointed her parents, but when she did she felt like the worst person in the world. Yeah, that sucks. Sukue sighed. I still hate him. But looking back, I should have stopped after blowing him up. I think you should have stopped before that, but whatever. Achiko thought. Why do you hate him so much? Achiko asked. I mean, I know he's kind of a jerk, but I don't think it's because of that. It's because he's an asshole. Sukue shouted. He's been picking on my dad for years. He's the reason Dad made me. Because that fucker has been making sure people won't go anywhere near him. Wait, he's been bullying him? Achiko asked. Since he was fucking 5. Sukue shouted. But Dad doesn't care. He still defends him and says he can be a great hero despite the fact that he's been beating him up with his quirk for years. There was a short pause before Achiko spoke. Why didn't you tell the teachers? Dad doesn't want me to, Sukue said. He said it would hurt his career as a hero. So instead you thought that he would rather you humiliate him in front of the entire class? Achiko pointed out. I know it was dumb. Sukue admitted. But he just pissed me off. And I was tired of him just getting away scot-free. I had to do something. She felt a hand on her back and looked at Achiko. It's okay, Achiko said. Honestly, if I was in your position, I would probably just have told the teachers. You ignored him when he asked you not to tell anyone about you being a robot. Android. Sukue corrected. And the reason I didn't is because of how Dad works. He always cares more about others way more than himself. If I do something that just affects us, then he won't be that mad, especially because it's something that probably would end well for us. But with Bakugo, it negatively affects someone else, meaning that Dad would probably hate me if I went through with it. Trust me, I wanted to, but I ran the idea through my processors and decided it was a bad idea. Why didn't you run humiliating Bakugo through your processors? Achiko asked. I did. Sukue sighed. Once at first I just wanted to blow him up. I ran that through my processors and figured that Dad would only be a little upset. But then I kept thinking of new ways to humiliate him and I didn't think to run those through my processors. I have a program in my head that tells me what my actions will do, and yet I somehow still suck at decision making. Sukue slammed her head onto the table. I am a fucking failure. No, you're not, Achiko said. You might be an android, but you're basically human. You walk like one, talk like one, and act like one. And humans make mistakes. We have all sorts of things to help us not make mistakes, but we still do. No one's perfect. Sukue sighed. Thanks, Achiko. You're welcome, Achiko said, giving her a bright smile. Now let's eat. Our food is getting cold. Don't worry about it. I'll heat 'em up. Sukue said, looking at Achiko's bowl while her eyes glowed red. Please don't laser my noodles, Achiko said. Sukue pouted and her eyes went back to green. Fine. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Niza sat in his office doing what he always did, plotting and drinking tea, when suddenly he heard a knock at his door. Come in, Niza said. Izuku slowly walked into his office before giving Nizu a nervous look. Ah, Izuku. Good. Niza said. I wanted to talk about Sukue's, well, calling it a fight would be horribly inaccurate. I wanted to talk about Sukue's humiliation of Bakugo and Ida. I am so sorry about that. Izuku rapidly apologized. I don't know what she was thinking when she did that. I swear I will make sure this never happens again. What did Bakugo do to you? Niza asked, making Izuku freeze. What? Izuku said quietly. Sukue has existed for less than a year. Meaning that unless Bakugo did something incredibly horrible to her within that time, then Sukue's hatred of him stems from you. Nizu explained. Bakugo is also known to act extremely aggressively towards you, and you tend to act even more meek and fearful whenever he is around. So my question to you is, what did Bakugo do to you that would make Sukue act in such a vicious and slightly amusing manner? Well, Izuku was sweating nervously as he desperately tried to find a way to answer this question. Was he perhaps one of the people who bullied you? Nizu asked. And no. Izuku lied. Kaken would never do something like that. There was a short pause before Nizu shook his head and spoke again. Izuku, you and I are both aware of my abilities. So I don't know why you would think it was a good idea to lie to me. Izuku stayed silent. How about this? You're going to tell me everything. And if you lie 3 times, then Bakugo will be expelled. Nizu said. What? Izuku shouted in shock. That's not fair. Yes, it would be incredibly unfair for you to get him expelled because you don't want to do something as simple as telling me the truth, Nizu said, his upbeat tone never changing. Now I'll ask you again. Did he bully you? Well, he may have said some mean things and accidentally used his quirk on me a few times. Izuku lied. That's another lie. Nizu pointed out. 2 more of those and Bakugo is out. Izuku panicked. Okay, maybe it wasn't accidental. But I'm sure he just wanted to practice his quirk and needed something to use it on. That's another lie, Nizu said. But I wasn't lying. Izuku said. Really, I'm sure that's why. I said that if you lie 3 times then Bakugo is expelled, Nizu repeated. I never said those lies have to be directed at me. Izuku stopped talking as what Nizu said sunk in. We both know that he doesn't need to use a person to practice his quirk on, and even if he did, that will still be both cruel and illegal, Nizu told him. You have one last chance, Izuku. Tell me the truth. Bakugo's future is in your hands. Izuku hung his head in defeat. He had no choice. He had to tell him everything. The next day. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Bakugo, Nizu said, greeting his guest as they entered his office. No problem. Now, what the fuck did my son do now? Mitsuki asked. I didn't do shit. Bakugo said. Aunt Mitsuki. Izuku said, shocked at just how upfront she was. Oh hey, Izuku. Oh, Sukue's here too. Mitsuki said before turning her head to her son. And I doubt we got called here for something either of them did, so it must have been you. Actually it might have been me, Sukue said nervously. She knew where this was going and she would accept her punishment with dignity. Not really, Nizu said. Wait, what? Sukue said in slight shock. Never mind, guess I don't know where this was going. We will talk about it when our last guest arrives, Nizu explained. Last guest? Izuku asked. Who dash? Sorry, I'm late. The traffic was really bad, I hope you can forgive me. Izuku froze as he immediately recognized the voice of the person who just came into the room. He turned around and his fears were confirmed. Mom, he shouted in shock before turning to Nizu. Why you called my mom? But I'm not a student. True. But you are still a minor and therefore I am still obligated to tell her what you told me. Nizu explained. So I invited her over and she said yes. Izuku, what is this about? Inko asked as she took a seat next to her son. Allow me to explain, Nizu said. Yesterday the students were having 2-on-2 matches against each other. Yeah, and he fucking lost, Mitsuki said. I'm guessing that was why he was crying yesterday. Hag. Bakugo growled at his mother. Sukue snickered, but Izuku gave her look, making her cut it out immediately. Yes, he did in fact lose, Nizu confirmed. But there's more to it than that. Nizu coughed to clear his throat before speaking again. She hacked into the communications and used them to taunt Bakugo into a trap before using her heat vision to detonate all of the nitroglycerin on his body, blowing up half of the building they were in and doing horrible damage to Bakugo's body and destroying all of his clothes. Then she went up to him and taunted him some more while he attempted to punch her metal body, doing more damage to himself. She then proceeded to knock him down, sit on him and humiliate his partner, all the while blaming him for their loss. The fight was being monitored, so this all happened in front. Izuku and Sukue cringed as both Mitsuki and Inko had shocked looks on their faces. Mitsuki recovered first before looking at Sukue and saying, "That was a little bit much." "Yeah, I know." Sukue sighed. Normally this would call for a suspension at the very least, however, I decided to ask Izuku what Bakugo could have done to deserve such humiliation, and the response I got was very enlightening, Nizu said. Bakugo raised an eyebrow in confusion. He had a bad feeling about this. What are you talking about? You see, after forcing the truth out of Izuku, I found out that Bakugo had been bullying Izuku for the last 10 years, Nizu said. I fucking knew it. Mitsuki shouted. I always knew you were being a fucking asshole to him this whole time. But whenever I asked Izuku, he would always make excuses for you. But not this fucking time. Keiketsuki, Inko said, giving him a betrayed look. I just put the nerd in his goddamn place. It's not fucking bully, old hag. Bakugo shouted back. You're right. It's not bullying. Niza said, getting everyone's attention. It's more along the lines of serious physical and mental abuse. Mitsuki turned to Nizu, eyes wide with disbelief. What? Apparently Bakugo has been physically beating Izuku using his quirk, which, may I remind you, is illegal, for long periods of time, quite frequently, all the while saying horrible things to him. In fact, his nickname Deku translates to useless, meaning he literally addresses him as useless each time he sees him. This almost surely the cause for Izuku's extremely low self-esteem. Niza said. This repeated targeting combined with Izuku's quirklessness is almost certainly the reason Izuku was ostracized by all of his fellow students, meaning that he is responsible for socially isolating him as well. This behavior continued into his teens to the point where he literally told him to jump off the school roof. The room was silent for a moment as Niza let his words sink in. Everyone but Izuku was shocked. Inko had a look of horror etched on her face as tears slid down her cheeks. Sukue, who had already known about the bullying but didn't know just how bad it was glaring at Bakugo, her eyes glowing red. Izuku just hit his head down, ashamed that he may have ruined Katsuki's chances at becoming a hero. Bakugo was glaring at Nizu for saying all this unimportant shit that was sure to piss off his mother. And Mitsuki. No one could see her expression as she stood there frozen in place. Apparently the teachers and staff of those schools just lied in order to not harm Bakugo's chances of becoming a hero just because of a quirkless child, Nizu explained. Please be reassured that we'll be investigating those schools for discrimination and child endangerment. There was another long pause before Mitsuki finally unfroze. Suddenly the room was filled with a dangerous aura emanating off of her. She turned around to face her child and Bakugo felt fear course through him. How fucking dare you? She said with barely contained fury. You want to be a fucking hero. And you do shit like that. Izuku butt in. Aunt Mitsuki, I dash. Mitsuki turned to him and Izuku instantly closed his mouth in fear. I don't want to hear any more of your excuses. So sit down and shut the fuck up. Anything Izuku could have said was drowned out by mind-numbing terror. I'm not going to punish you here, Mitsuki said, turning back to Bakugo. But when we get home, I don't even fucking know what I'm going to do to you. Why? Everyone looked back at Inko, who was now actively sobbing. Why? Why would you do such a thing? Inko asked. I thought you were friends. Why? I don't understand. Mitsuki quickly moved to comfort her crying friend, wrapping her arms around her all the while glaring at her son, telling him without words that this was his fault. Bakugo actually felt a bit of guilt, but he quickly. Mom, Izuku said quietly. You told me you fell, Inko said to her son. Or that it was an accident. Or. Why did you lie to me, Izuku? Even more, shame-filled Izuku as he couldn't even find the will to look his mother in the eye. Now Mrs. Bakugo, your son has committed several illegal acts that in any other scenario would not only result in his immediate expulsion but would also likely land him in a juvenile detention center, Niza said. Mitsuki was seething with rage, her eyes fixed on her son who was now beginning to realize how fucked he was. However, Niza said, after looking things over and after Izuku begged me for 5 hours nonstop, I have decided to leave the decision of Bakugo's expulsions in the hand of Mrs. Midoriya. In truth, Niza didn't really have much choice. Expelling Bakugo would cause Izuku to have a mental crisis bigger than the one he is currently having. That would mean Izuku might not even be able to work, and if he did work it would likely be at dramatically slower speeds. This would displease the government, who had a lot to ask of the young man, and they would most likely force Nizu to take Bakugo back anyway. However, neither him nor the government could stop Inko from suing the Bakugos, which, given the fact that it would be a case involving 2 UA students, would inevitably catch the media's attention, and after that Nizu would have no choice but to expel Bakugo. And the government couldn't do anything about that without seriously harming UA's reputation. So, in the end, it was all in Inko's hands. Inko, Mitsuki said to her friend. I won't blame you. No matter what you do. You're my friend and I let my son do something terrible to yours. Whatever you want to do, I won't hate you for it. Bakugo balled his fist. This whole part of his day sheds a different light on his actions. Seeing Inko and Mitsuki's reactions actually managed to make the boy feel a little bad. But still, they were talking about his future as a hero. If Inko wanted to, she could put an end to all his hopes and dreams in one fell swoop. Inko sniffed. It's not your fault, Mitsuki. Those teachers who let him get away with it and encouraged him are the ones responsible. I won't press charges. Inko looked at Bakugo. I don't know why you would do something like that to Izuku, but I really hope that you can improve and become a better hero. Well, that felt like getting blown up all over again. Fuck, why does hurt? Bakugo wondered as he avoided eye contact with anyone in the room. And why the fuck does this feel familiar? Are you fucking kidding me? Sukue shouted. You mean he just gets away with this? She wanted to punch something. Bakugo in particular. But her programming wouldn't allow her. So all she could do is scream. Oh heavens no, Nisa said. While we will be keeping Bakugo enrolled here, there will be consequences for his actions. Firstly, Bakugo will have to attend several therapy and anger management sessions. He will be excluded from all extracurricular events including the sports festival, and if he is caught breaking the rules, he can be subject to immediate expulsion. Bakugo's eyes widened. If he couldn't participate in the sports festival, then how the hell was he supposed to get exposure? Bakugo was about to speak up when his mother saw him open his mouth and glared at him, telling him without words to shut his mouth. That didn't do much to calm Sukue, who was still enraged. Collecting herself, Sukue spoke. Can I leave for a little bit? Yes. In fact, I would like to speak to Mrs. Midoriya and Mrs. Bakugo alone, please. Nisa said. Bakugo didn't say a word as he got up and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Sukue grabbed her father by the wrist and dragged him out of the room. There was a short pause before Nisa spoke again. Now, let's talk about Izuku. As I said earlier, I had to force information out of him while he tried to defend Bakugo. Why the hell would he do that? Mitsuki asked. He has to know that what Katsuki was doing to him was wrong. He did, Nisa said. At least on some level. The fact that he hid his abuse for Bakugo's sake shows that deep down he knows that what Bakugo did was wrong and therefore could get him in trouble. However, he most likely did not want to confront that fact. He made up excuses in his head, trying to justify or explain away Bakugo's abuse. This is likely because he still desperately wishes to be friends with Bakugo like they were when they were young, so he just endures the abuse and hopes that it ends. Oh, Izuku, Inko said sadly. The only exception to this seems to be when Bakugo targeted other children. Then he would attempt to stop him. Nizu explained. I think it goes without saying that Izuku will need to go to therapy as well. As his employer, I can't force him to, but since you're his mother, you can. Oh, of course. Inko stuttered. My poor Izuku. Good, now one last thing, Nisa said. This desire to be friends with Bakugo again was likely a result of his loneliness. The fact that you had to work most of the time not helping this, although that was not your fault. Now that you have much more free time, I would like to suggest that you move on campus. This would allow you and Sukue to spend much more time with him and would allow us to protect you. Protect me? Inko questioned. Yes. You see, right now most people only know about a rumor saying that a robot girl is a UA student. They don't know who she is, what she looks like, or who made her. Nizu explained. But when they do, I have no doubt people will want to get their hands on him. Whether it be to kill him to try and stop the new technological advancements or to try and use him for their own purposes. And there is a large chance that they would try to use you to get to him. Inko's eyes went wide. She had never really considered such a thing, but when Nisa said it, it sounded so obvious. I'll do it, Inko said shakily. Even if I wasn't in danger, I want to help my son. Nisa's smile grew a little bigger. Well, then let's get the paperwork sorted out. Meanwhile, Sukue dragged Izuku outside further and further away from Nisa's office. Sukue, Izuku said. Sukue stopped, letting go of his wrist and turning to meet his eyes. Why? Sukue shouted. Why do you keep defending that asshole? And don't give me that crap about him not giving up. He gave up on you pretty fucking fast. Izuku tried to say something, but Sukue cut him off. He has caused you nothing but pain. And yet you still want to be friends with him. Sukue shouted. Sukue cut him off again. I looked through my processors over and over again, but even they can't find a reason for why you would do this to yourself. Sukue shouted. Because it was better than being alone, Izuku said. There was a short pause as what Izuku said sunk in. Because the explosions and insults always hurt less than whenever I was sitting there with no one to talk to, Izuka said, tears starting to roll down his cheeks. He was the closest thing to a friend I ever had. I really wanted to be friends with him again. I wanted to pretend like those things didn't happen. There was another short pause before Izuka spoke again. I'm sorry, Sukue, Izuka said to his creation. I programmed you to care about me and then got upset when you did. I am not okay. I shouldn't act like I know better. I have failed you as a father. Izuku was going to say more when he felt two arms wrap around him. Dad, I'm sorry for yelling. Sukue apologized. You haven't failed me. You just made mistakes. And from what I'm told, that's just part of being human. Sukue, Izuka said. I could have handled this situation better too, Sukue admitted. So now that we've apologized, can we just put this behind us? Izuka looked at her for a moment before smiling. That sounds good. Thank you, Sukue. You're welcome, Dad. Sukue smiled back. The Midoriyas moved into one of Yue's buildings with no difficulty. Inko mostly stayed inside and did things like watching TV, knitting, etc. Sukue went out a lot more, mainly with Achiko, but Tsuyu would join in sometimes. Izuku, however, was walking into his lab with Nizu and All Might. Are you sure you want to do this? Izuku asked again. I have my doubts, but I made peace with them some time ago. All Might said. Niza has convinced me that this is the way to go about things, and I'm not about to back out now. Yes, and the sooner we get this done, the sooner we can move on and start with the next phase, Niza said. We need to move quickly. After all, we are creating the next symbol of peace. Izuka sighed. Project Q. What would probably be the biggest project in Izuka's life? He still remembers when Niza had assigned him this Herculean task. Flashback. Izuka was in shock. One for all. A quirk that could be transferred from person to person, gaining power each time. All Might's quirk, Izuka muttered. That's why are you telling me this? Yes, I am confused as well. All Might said. Why, it's quite simple. Midoriya, do you think that you could give one for all to a machine? Nizu asked. Izuka thought about that for a second before answering. Well, from the sound of it, one for all is an energy-based quirk. It doesn't make you stronger by altering your body's muscles, otherwise you wouldn't grow weaker after losing it. And if it's energy, then it's possible that the biological energy that is one for all could be converted into regular energy. So it's possible? Nizu asked again. Possibly, Izuka said. Wait. All Might said. I'm confused. Are you saying I should give the quirk to young Sukue? Nizu shook his head. No. This is a perfect opportunity. Why spend time searching for the perfect successor when we can just make the perfect successor? All Might realized what Nizu was talking about, as did Izuku. You want me to make a new android to wield one for all? Izuku asked, slightly freaked out by how important the task sounded. Yes. Now you're getting it. Nizu exclaimed in an excited tone. If we go this route, we will have complete control over the personality and traits of the ninth wielder. No risk of them secretly being a spy. Neither All Might nor Izuka knew what to say. They couldn't deny the appeal of the option, but All Might was unsure about giving one for all to a machine, and Izuka was unsure he could build something like that. I will need to consider this. All Might said. Of course, Niza said before looking at Izuku. I'm sure you will do the same. Right, Midoriya? Why, yes. Izuka stuttered. Back to the present. All Might ultimately said yes, leaving Izuku with little choice but to accept. The three walked up to the back wall of the lab, and Izuka placed his hand on it. Recognized. Izuka Midoriya, said a robotic voice. Suddenly the wall sealed back and opened up, revealing a hidden elevator. The three entered and Izuku pressed a button. The doors closed and the elevator descended down into Izuka's secret underground lab. This huge lab, dug out by power loader and many robots, was built so Izuka could make bigger things in both quantity and quality. It also functions as a way for Izuku to work on top secret projects away from the public eye. After a little over a minute, they had reached the lowest level. The doors slid open once more, revealing the largest section of Izuku's lab. It was a few stories tall and about as wide as a third of a football field. In the back was a huge cylinder hooked up to a few machines. All Might looked in awe at the lab. This place is huge. Indeed. Power Loader worked very hard to dig out this amount of space. Niza said. I say that his raise was well earned. All Might, Izuka said. The time is here. Izuka pointed to a metal pod that was hooked up to the cylinder. Please enter the pod. All Might looked at it for a few seconds, his hesitation clear in his eyes. He swiftly steeled his resolve and walked into the tube. Once All Might was inside, Izuku went to strap him in. Sorry, this is just meant to keep you in place. The process won't do any damage to you, but I can't promise it will be pleasant. It's fine. I have endured much worse. All Might said, taking a look at his stomach. Izuku gave the hero a concerned look before walking to the control panel. Once he reached the control panel, Izuku put his hand on a switch. All Might, I'm starting the machine now. All Might nodded and braced himself for the worst. Izuku flipped the switch and the machine came to life. All Might grit his teeth, he could feel the strength slowly being sucked from him. It was extremely unpleasant but not all that painful. That swiftly changed. The machine started beeping and Izuku's face twisted in alarm. Something's wrong, Izuku said. The machine is having difficulties removing the quirk. Should we stop it? Nizu asked. No. I've prepared for this, Izuku said, flipping another switch. The machine got louder and All Might could feel the power draining from him faster. But not only that, he could feel One for All, resisting, attempting to stay inside him, fighting the machine. And it hurt like hell. Small grunts of pain came from the hero as he tried his hardest to endure it. The beeping didn't stop and Izuku could tell something was wrong. It looks like I'll have to increase the power again, he thought nervously. This time Izuku flipped his switches and the machine became extremely loud. Ahi! The pain became too much to bear and All Might started to scream. All Might! Izuku shouted. Something's wrong. It's like the quirk is resisting the machine. Perhaps you should turn it off, Nisa suggested. I can't. We're too far into the process. If I stop it now I have no clue how it could affect All Might. Izuku said, completely panicking. Ahe! All Might continued to scream and sparks started to come out of the machine. The machine is overloading. Izuku shouted. We need to dash. Boom. Suddenly the machine exploded. Multicolored lights filled the room and enveloped most of the people inside. Nizu, who was standing further from the machine, had to look away from the blinding Randao lights covering his beady eyes. When the light and explosion died down, Nizu looked back at the lab. The pod was destroyed, but All Might only seemed to be slightly injured and was passed out. Izuku was also unconscious but seemed to be completely uninjured. The cylinder in the back had lit up like a rainbow, colors emitting from it like a disco ball. Nizu wasted no time and pulled out his phone. I need medical assistance. Now. Meanwhile with Sukue. Sukue and Achiko were at an arcade, Achiko holding an absolutely enormous amount of tickets while Sukue was playing skee-ball. Sukue held up the ball before rolling it up the track and into the 10,000-point hole. Isn't using targeting systems cheating? Achiko asked. There aren't any rules against it, Sukue said, taking the tickets from the machine. Huh? Sukue didn't have a phone, per se, rather calls just went directly to her head. Hello? Sukue said. What? I'm heading there now. What happened? Achiko asked. Something's wrong with Dad. I have to go. Take all the tickets. Sukue said, running out of the arcade at max speed. Later, at the UA medical wing, Izuku and All Might were laid out in hospital beds. All Might was behind a curtain on the opposite side of the room so no one could see his true form. Izuku had an oxygen mask over his mouth and nose and a few other machines attached to him. Where's my baby? Inko said, running into the room. What happened to Dad? Sukue said, running in alongside her grandmother. Please quiet down. Recovery girl said. Yelling won't help anyone. The two Midoriyas looked at Izuku with a mix of concern and dread. An experiment went wrong, Nizu explained. Somehow Izuku's strength was drained from him. His muscles, his bones, his eyesight. Even his immune system. And he appears to be in some kind of coma as well. Sukue scanned Izuku's body and found that everything they were saying was true. Izuku's body was substantially weaker than this morning. What's going to happen to him? Inko asked fearfully, tears sliding down her face. He should be fine for the most part. Recovery girl said. He should still be able to walk and move. Although I wouldn't suggest running. I can't tell without an eye test, but he will likely need glasses. Also, he's going to have to take some medication to strengthen his immune system. And what about the coma? Inko asked. When is he gonna wake up? I don't know. But from the brain scans, it shouldn't take too long. A few weeks at the longest. How did this happen? Sukue asked. What kind of experiments were you guys doing? Nisa spoke up. I'm afraid that's Dash. Classified information. Of fucking course it is. Sukue said. What does Dad do that's not classified? I realize that you must be tired of hearing that. But to be fair, you have a very poor track record when it comes to keeping secrets. Nisa said. Inko sat on a chair next to Izuku, holding his hand and crying. My baby. My poor baby. Sukue walked behind her and put a hand on her back. It's okay, Grandma. He's gonna be okay. Recovery Girl told us so. Dad wouldn't want you to cry. This did very little to stop the tears, but she did feel a little bit better. The next day in class. Man, those press guys are so pushy. Mina complained. Yeah, and very rude too. So unmanly. Kirishima added. Midoriya, you're so lucky you didn't have to deal with them since you live on campus. Toru said. Yeah, lucky, Sukue said in a depressed tone. Achiko gave her friend a concerned look. Midoriya? Are you okay? Kaminari asked. Yeah, you've been gloomy since we got here, Suro added. Midoriya's father is in a coma, Aizawa said, walking into the room. His body has been weakened and he likely won't wake up for the rest of the month. What? Shouted the entire class except Todoroki. Doc's in a coma. Mina shouted. Doc? Jiro questioned. Yeah, it's his nickname, Mina said. But enough about that. What happened to him? An experiment went wrong. The details of which are none of your business. Aizawa said. The only thing you need to know is that after he wakes up, don't overwhelm him. In his current state, it might actually give him a heart attack. Most of the class looked concerned, with many of them sending sympathetic looks towards Sukue. Except for Bakugo. He was just angry. Later, outside the Yue gates. A blue-haired man in a hoodie looked at the press, swarming outside the gates. The man, Tamura Shigaraki, smiled with glee as he walked off to the side. How rude of them to ignore the people like this. He said, I'll just have to let them in. He walked over to the side where no one was looking and pressed his hand against the wall. The wall started breaking apart and Tamura grinned. Warning! Defenses under attack. Subduing attacker. Shouted a robotic voice. Shit! Tamura said. Better speed this up before the heroes come dash. Before Tamura could finish that sentence, a turret sprung out from the top of the wall and shot him with a tranquilizer dart. Fuck! Tamura said, looking at the dart that was now lodged in his arm. Had it not been for an endurance and stamina quirk he stole, he would be on the ground. Tamura decided to abandon his plan and escape. And the turret decided he didn't have enough darts in him. After being hit by about 6 more darts, Tamura managed to escape the range of the turret. Trying not to lose consciousness, Tamura called Kurojairi with his phone. Get me. Now. Tamura demanded. I'm in an alley not far away from Ye, get me out of here. After about a minute, a black portal opened below Tamura, bringing him back to the bar. Tamura hit the wooden floor with a thud. They upgraded their security. I can see that, Kurojairi said, picking up the phone and dialing the doctor. Should we postpone our attack? No. As long as we have that guy with the electric quirk, the security shouldn't be a problem. Tamura said tiredly. I'm going to take a nap now. Not because of these darts. I just happen to be tired. And with that, Tamura fell into a deep sleep. Izuku opened his eyes slowly. Everything seemed blurry to him for some reason. The lab. What happened? Izuku thought. Need to get back to the lab, figure out what went wrong. Izuku tried to sit up but found it was significantly harder than normal. With enough effort, he did manage to sit himself up and he looked around at his surroundings. I'm in the medical wing? That's right, the explosion. Izuku remembered. I need to see if All Might's okay. Izuku moved his legs over the bed and tried to stand. The minute Izuku was out of bed, he noticed his legs felt weaker. He was shaking from just standing. He tried to walk and after a few steps, he fell over. Ow, Izuku said, what's going on? Why do I feel so weak? How long was I in that bed? Izuku tried to stand up again, but he kept falling down. After a couple of minutes, Recovery Girl walked in and saw what Izuku was attempting to do. What are you doing? Recovery Girl scolded. Get back in bed. You shouldn't be moving yet. Recovery Girl. What happened? How long was I out? Izuku asked. We can talk about that later. Get back in bed. Recovery Girl ordered. After Recovery Girl helped Izuku back into his bed, she explained. Your lab exploded. However, luckily neither you or All Might were killed or even particularly injured. She said. Izuku sighed with relief. Both of you were knocked out and weakened. Recovery Girl said. Weakened? Izuku asked in a concerned tone. What do you mean? Well, All Might can still use his power up from he can't use it for as long and he's not as strong as he was before. Recovery Girl said. Yes, that's what we expected would happen. But what do you mean by I was weakened? Izuku asked. I was just about to explain that. Have some patience. Recovery Girl complained. Your body is much weaker than it was before. Your muscles, your bones, your eyes, your immune system, basically everything but your brain. Oh, Izuku said with wide eyes. That's it? That's all you're going to say after hearing something like that? Recovery Girl said. Well, I wasn't really using anything but my brain all too much anyway, Izuku said optimistically. Will I still be able to walk and use my arms, right? After some physical therapy, yes, although don't expect too much out of your stamina. Recovery Girl said. Also, you'll need to take pills to strengthen your immune system. Speaking of which, Recovery Girl took out a bottle of pills and a bottle of water from her pocket and handed them to Izuku. Take 2 every 6 hours. When you run out, make sure to come back to me immediately. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Izuku said before opening up the bottle and taking 2 pills. Lastly, you're going to need these. Recovery Girl said, handing Izuku a pair of glasses. Izuku took the glasses, looking at them for a bit before putting them on. He blinked repeatedly as the world suddenly became less blurry. I'll inform the principal that you've woken up. But first I'll inform your family. Recovery Girl said. They've been very worried about you. You've been out for about a week after all. Izuku felt as if a knife made of guilt stabbed him in the stomach. He could only imagine how they must feel. His mother was most likely drowning in tears. And Sukue, well, Izuku had a feeling he knew how she would react. 5 minutes later. You idiot! Sukue shouted, giving her father a light slap to the back of the head. Ow! Izuku responded. How could you do something so stupid and reckless? I don't even know what you did. But I know it was stupid. Sukue yelled. Wah! Izuku! I'm so happy you're okay. Inko cried as she embraced her son. This is about what I expected. Izuku thought, unable to keep the smile off of his face. I'm sorry for worrying you too. Izuku apologized. You better be. Sukue pouted. I had half a mind to shake you out of your coma. Luckily my logic sensors told me that would do more harm than good. You shouldn't need your logic sensors to tell you that, but I'm glad you're using them at least. Izuku thought. Suddenly Izuku felt Sukue envelop him into a tight hug. Sukue! Izuku cried. This is what you get for making us worry. Accept your punishment. Sukue said. She wasn't even hugging him all that tight, but his weakened body made it feel a whole lot more forceful than it really was. After a few seconds, Izuku managed to find comfort in the twin embraces of his mother and daughter. Izuku struggled his arms out from the hug and wrapped them around the two of them. Thank you, he said sincerely. Recovery Girl smiled as she watched the Midoriya family embrace each other. A few hours later, it took a while for Nizu to convince Sukue and Inko to leave, but after much insistence from both himself and Izuku. Now Nizu and Izuku were alone. This is quite troubling, Nizu said. With your body in such a weakened state, it will surely slow down the progress of your work. No, it's fine, Izuku said. My brain was unaffected, so I should be able to work just as well as before. You and I both know that's not true, Nizu replied. While your work doesn't require much physical strain, use of your arms and legs are still required, and with how your body is, walking and lifting things for any extended period of time would be problematic. Izuku couldn't say he was wrong, but he didn't want to admit he was right. We will have to have that competition sooner so we can get you an assistant as soon as possible, Nizu said. On top of learning from you and assisting in minor projects, they will have to look after your health and perform various tasks for you. Izuku didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. Having someone help him with every little thing. It made him feel useless. Like a deku. Is that really necessary? Izuku asked. And what are we gonna do about the secret projects? If my assistant is a student, then they can't know about those projects, let alone help me with them. Yes, that will be a problem. Perhaps you could build yourself an assistant in addition to the contest winner. Nizu said before shaking his head. Well, we can worry about that later, I suppose. For now, you'll be taking a few days off so you can recover, and no, this is not optional. Recovery Girl will bring you a wheelchair so you can move around. Please don't overexert yourself. Yes, sir, Izuku said. Nizu nodded and walked out of the room, leaving Izuku to think. Build an assistant, Izuku muttered before his eyes widened with realization. Later that night, Niza walked into Izuku's workshop to see Izuku doing exactly what he expected him to be doing. Working hunched over a table trying to draw up some blueprints, although due to his weakened body the sketches were not very good. Midoriya, I told you that your days off were not optional. Niza reminded. This is a personal project, Izuku said, not turning away from his work. You said I could build my own assistant. So I am. In a manner of speaking. Niza walked up to Izuku's table and hopped up on it so he could see what was on the blueprints. Ah, I see. Niza said before hopping back down. Very clever, Midoriya, please continue. Thank you, sir. Izuku said before going back to focusing on his blueprints. A day later. After classes were done, a good amount of students gathered around Sukue with one question on their minds. Did your dad wake up yet? Achiko asked her friend with concern. Yup. He's fully awake and out of the medical wing. Sukue happily reported. Yeah, all right, said Mina and Kaminari. I am glad to hear that your father is well. Ida said. Same, Todoroki said from his seat. Hey, we should pay him a visit. Mina suggested. That sounds great. But not all of us should go at once. Sukue suggested. Dad's body was weakened after the accident. He can't even really walk right now. Per document. Kaminari said. What happened that left him in such a condition? Ida asked. I don't know. Sukue said, her tone showing her frustration. Everyone keeps telling me it's top secret and that I can't know. What? That's such bull. Toru said. Well, to be fair, Midoriya is probably the last person you should tell a secret to. Jiro added. Hey. Sukue said. No offense, but you literally gave away that you were a robot before the first day of school. Jiro pointed out. Humph. Sukue pouted. Anyway, who's going to see Doc right now? Toru asked. I can wait. I'll probably see him around at some point, Jiro said. Give him my good wishes, Tokoyami said. Same, Todoroki said before exiting the class. Soon it was narrowed down to Sukue, Achiko, Ida, Mina, Kaminari, and Momo. Alrighty then, let's go. Sukue said to her group of friends. At Izuku's lab. Sukue and her friends stood outside of Izuku's lab, in front of the door. It's locked, Sukue said. That's weird. Normally it's not locked. She shrugged and pressed the doorbell. After about half a minute, the door unlocked. There we go. Come on, guys. Sukue said. She opened the door and walked into the workshop. Hey, Dad, I bought some friends. The door was locked 4-. Sukue stopped when she saw her father. What the hell? Kaminari said. Whoa. Mina said. Achiko, Momo, and Ida were too shocked to say anything. Oh. Hi. Sorry about the door. I've been busy. Izuku said. Attached to Izuku were 4 mechanical arms. They look like Dr. Octopus's arms in the Spider-Man PS4 game. 2 of which he was using to hold himself up and the other 2 were free in the air. Dad, mind explaining why you look like something out of Mina's special books? Sukue asked. Hey. Mina said. Well, is she wrong? Kaminari asked. While Kaminari was getting slapped, Izuki just looked at them confused. Special books? Sukue sighed. Her dad was too innocent. How is it that your daughter knows about this before you do? Mina asked. This is a highly inappropriate discussion. Ida said. Mina's personal taste is such things should not be discussed in a public conversation. Why does everyone assume I'm into tentacles? Mina muttered. I think what she meant to ask was, why exactly do you have 4 metal appendages attached to your body? Momo asked. Oh, these? Well, since my body is significantly weaker than before, I needed something to help me move and do my work. So I created these arms to help me. I call them the Octo Arms. Because I got the idea from an old comic book. Izuku explained. They are fully functional robot appendages that can handle everything from precise, delicate tasks to combat. You can fight with those things? Sukue asked. In response to that question, 2 of Izuku's arms shot out at amazing speeds and picked up an heavy-looking machine and ripped it apart before smashing it into the ground and crumpling it. Whoa, Kaminari said. That's so cool. Mina said. Impressive as always, Midoriya. Ida applauded. How does it work? It doesn't look like there are any manual controls. Momo asked. Ah yes, you see it actually receives orders directly from my brain, via needles in my spine, Izuku explained. Needles in your what now? Sukue, Achiko, and Mina asked. Well, it takes the messages coming from my dash. Izuku was interrupted. You put needles in your spine, Sukue said bluntly. You did something stupid and reckless, again. Well, I made sure it would work beforehand via some simulations. Izuku weakly defended. Sukue didn't look impressed and walked up to Izuku before motioning for him to come down. Izuku lowered himself to the point where his feet almost touched the ground and he was face to face with Sukue. Sukue then flicked his forehead. Ow! Izuku reacted. Stop messing with your body, Sukue ordered. But Izuku got another flick. Ow! No buts. I want you to promise me you won't mess with your body anymore, Sukue said. But Izuku got yet another flick. Okay, I promise. What is this family dynamic? Everyone else wondered. Well, I was going to ask for one of those things, but I think I'll pass on the needles in the spine, Mina said. Well, I probably wouldn't have been able to make you one, Izuku said. The transceiver that allows this to take orders from your brain is made of rather rare materials, and each set of arms would only be able to take commands from the person it was made for. So it can only be used by one person? Achiko asked. Yes, Izuku confirmed. Well, Mina, it looks like if you want your real-life tentacle hentai, you're gonna have to come to document. Kaminari teased before getting elbowed by Mina. What is tentacle hentai? Izuku asked. Anyway, Momo said, desperately trying to change the subject. Are you feeling okay, Midoriya? You just got out of the medical wing, so is it wise to be working right now? Yeah, shouldn't you take it easy after that? Kaminari asked. I agree. After being in a coma you should be resting, Ida said, with Achiko nodding in agreement. Happiness surged in Izuku's chest. Never in his life had this many people cared about him. It just warmed his heart and made his face scrunch up. Why did your face get all gross? Achiko asked. I'm fine. Izuku sniffed. I was just finishing these arms today. After that, Nizu is making me take a mandatory day off. It's a good thing you have a boss like him. Any other boss would be happy to let you work yourself to death, Achiko said. Yeah, Izuku said. But, thank you for coming. And thank you for being friends with Sukue. I worried that due to her differences that she wouldn't be able to make any friends. Thank you so much for proving me wrong. No problem, Mina said. And don't forget we're your friends too. Yeah, both of you are really fun. Weird but fun, Kaminari said. It is a pleasure to be friends with both of you, Ida said. Indeed, Momo said politely. I'm glad I met you too, even if you seemed a bit odd at first, Achiko said. Izuku was crying now with how heartwarming this moment was for him. Thank you so much. The UA students then spent the rest of their visit trying to get Izuku to stop crying, their concern for him only making him cry more. All Might simply couldn't help but stare, as anyone would if they saw a teenager being held up by 4 mechanical arms. So are those comfortable? The arms? Yes, actually, Izuku answered. I put padding on the inside so the metal wouldn't dig into my flesh or break my spine. It's actually pretty comfortable. Nizu, All Might, and Izuku were riding down the elevator back down to Izuku's secret lab, which was now fully rebuilt. Actually, how are you feeling, All Might? Izuku asked. Any possible long-term effects of the power draining? Besides the obvious loss in power, I find myself feeling a little sore from time to time, All Might said. But other than that, I'm fine. I'm glad that both of you were able to recover as well as you did, Nizu said. Disregarding Midoriya's current state, of course. Honestly, I think my condition isn't all that bad, Izuku said. I've been told that these glasses suit me pretty well actually, and to be honest, that's the only compliment I've ever gotten on my looks. On that somewhat depressing note, the elevator dinged and they made it to the bottom floor. Perfect, Izuku said, exiting the elevator. This is what I needed to show you. Izuku gestured to the enormous tube-shaped container that was glowing with multicolored energy. All Might looked at it in awe as he got a strangely familiar feeling from the tube. Is that Dash? Yes, this is one for all, Izuku said. All the power that was obtained many generations of heroes is now stirring in this container. It's actually a little overwhelming to think about. All Might kept staring at the tube, feeling as if the energy was beckoning to him. He walked over to the container and slowly placed his hand on it. He could feel the energy already. It was warm, familiar. Like an old friend. Nana, All Might muttered. What was that? Izuku asked, not hearing what the hero had said. Nothing. All Might lied. It's just this energy it feels, alive almost. Well, that's because it is, Izuku said. Both All Might and Nizu gave Izuku a shocked expression, although it was hard to tell with Nizu. Well, it's not alive in a human or Nizu sense, but rather in a robotic sense, and not like Sukue robotic, but more like an AI in a movie, Izuku said. It even has something like programming and directives. Would you mind explaining a little more about those? Nizu asked. Well, I haven't figured out everything since I only just figured out how to look into One for All's biodata, Izuku explained. But there are a few things I have looked into. Firstly, the reason for the lab accident is because One for All was actively resisting the extraction. But One for All has never resisted transfer before. All Might pointed out. Yes, but this wasn't a transfer into an organic host. This was an extraction into a mechanical container. Izuku clarified. The quark semi-sentients fought against the unnatural transfer into an artificial vessel. And so it not only attempted to cling onto All Might, but it also made a last-ditch effort to jump into another vessel. You're referring to yourself, Nizu said. What? All Might said, barely understanding any of this. You were correct, Izuku said. I was for a few seconds the ninth wielder of One for All. Or rather, the 8.5 wielder. What? All Might shouted, now very bewildered. Interesting, Nizu said. Does this happen to have to do with your body's weakened state? Well, I don't have any confirmation of that, but that's probably the case, Izuku said. Although I do have a theory on why that happened. Please explain. Nizu urged. Well, you know how All Might deflated after his fight with All for One? Izuku asked, getting a nod from the two heroes. And you know how we explained that by saying that it was because of the surgery even though that didn't make any sense? What do you mean it doesn't make any sense? All Might asked. Yagi, you can't just lose muscle mass like that after a couple of surgeries, and even if you could, you would have lost a lot of things within that muscle mass, like nerve endings and veins. Also, your bones might not even fit in your body, Nizu said. By all means, what happened to you is a complete mystery. We just shrugged it off and said it was the surgery because we didn't have any explanation for it. Yes, that is correct. I also found it curious how he manages to regain his buff form. Izuku continued. Oh, that's easy. It's just like those people you see at the pool who try to make their fat look like muscle. All Might explained. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Well, firstly, I'm not even sure if that works. And secondly, that would be a redistribution of weight. You don't have any weight to redistribute, you're literally creating muscle out of nothing. Which should be impossible unless you have a quirk that allows you to do that. Oh, All Might said. I feel really dumb right now. So all these questions lead me to another question, Izuku said. Where does One for All get its power? There was a short pause as both Nizu and All Might considered the question. They both knew that One for All gained its power after transferring from user to user, but neither of them knew exactly where that power came from. Nizu had wondered about it a few times, but could never come up with an answer. Seeing as the two were stumped, Izuku continued. One for All gains power as it goes from user to user, meaning that either the users are somehow generating power for the quirk, or it's stealing power from them. Interesting, Nizu said, finally starting to get it. So you think that One for All is taking power from each user and giving it to the next user? Yes. I theorized that during the process of giving One for All to the next user, One for All's stockpiling aspect takes hold and leeches power from that person's body. Izuku explained. But I didn't pass One for All on when I became like this. All Might pointed out. Yes, but you were very, very close to death, Izuku said. It's possible that One for All viewed you as a lost cause and tried to take as much power from your body while you were still alive. That would explain the deflation. One for All sucked so much nutrients and energy out of Yagi that his muscles deteriorate at an accelerated rate, Nizu said. This had to be the most bewildering day of All Might's life. Not only were these two on a level of understanding that he was simply not on, but he was also learning that everything he had learned about his condition was wrong. Yes, exactly, Izuku confirmed. And so when One for All jumped into me, it made me a user, and much like with all users, when One for All leaves you, it takes some of your body's energy. Hence my weakened body. And it's possible that due to the artificial nature of the transfer and the quickness of it moving from your body to the machine, it's possible that it took more from you than intended. Nizu theorized. Ah, thank you, Midoriya. These mysteries had been bothering me for years. Well, they are still just theories. Izuku reminded him. Ones that we'll find out more on as I analyze One for All. But for now, I think we should move on to the project. Ah yes, I suppose we should, Nisa said. Please tell how much progress you've made on the new symbol of peace. I understand if you haven't been able to progress much, considering that you've only just gotten your hands on the quirk and you've been busy with your arms and figuring out the nature of one for all. Well, Izuku paused as he tried to figure out how to phrase what he was about to say. I wouldn't say I've made a lot of progress, but I haven't made significant progress. Come look. Izuku brought Nizu and All Might over to a table that contained a bunch of tools as well as 2 sheets of metal. Izuku grabbed one of the sheets with his metal arms and showed it to the 2 heroes. This is ultraninium, Izuku said. It's a new metal I've created that's rather weak. It's maybe about as strong as iron, Izuku said before crushing the metal with his arms. While it may be rather weak by itself, it serves an important function. Izuku picked up the other sheet of metal and once again attempted to crush it. However, this time it was much harder as the metal proved much more resilient, taking much longer to crush. You see, according to my calculations, if I created a new android using a significant amount of one-for-all energy, it would simply explode, no matter what type of metal I used. Izuku explained. So I had to create a new metal that was strong enough to handle all that power, which would not necessarily be impossible, but it would take a long time. So I thought that since one for all can empower people, that perhaps I could make a special metal that could absorb the power of one for all and use it to strengthen itself. When the metal is empowered with one for all, I call it plus ultraninium. Clever, Nisa said. But should you have crushed like that? It had valuable energy inside it after all? Oh, you don't need to worry about it all that much, Izuku said. The energy won't leave its vessel until it's either transferred or its vessel is completely destroyed. And even if its vessel is completely destroyed, the energy won't disperse. Rather, it will just jump onto the next closest vessel, most likely a living thing. That's good, All Might said. We won't have to worry about losing energy permanently. Yes, but that news also has some negative connotations, Nisa said, using his serious voice. If what Midoriya says is correct, then what we previously thought about one for all being unable to be stolen is incorrect, and if you manage to completely destroy a user, then you would gain their power. A thoughtful expression crossed Izuku's face as he pondered what Nizu just said. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about that. As even if someone gained one for all's energy, that doesn't mean they would be able to necessarily use it. While I can't confirm it, I have a theory that if anyone were to use one for all with ill intent, one for all would not activate due to its own programming. Well, until you can confirm that theory, we will have to be extra careful about who hears anything about this project, Nisa said. No one says anything about this project to anyone. Even if someone already knows about one for all, you can't tell them about any of this. Understood. Izuku nodded, but All Might seemed hesitant. What about Recovery Girl or Gran Torino? All Might asked. Or Dash? Yagi, Nisa said sharply. I don't need to tell you how much damage a villain could do with even just half of one for all. You need to promise me that you won't tell anyone about this project. No matter what. All Might hesitated for a moment. I guess I have no choice. Good. Now is there anything else you need to report on Midoriya? Nizu asked. Yes. Izuku said. There's one more very important thing I need to tell you about. It doesn't relate to the Symbol of Peace project necessarily, but in my opinion it could be even more important. More important than creating the next Symbol of Peace? Nizu asked. I'm curious about what that could possibly be. All Might didn't say anything but gave Izuku a curious look. Well, while I was wondering how exactly one for all gained its energy, I also ran some experiments to see if I could feed it energy. Izuku revealed. And I can. All Might's eyes widened and Nisa seemed to be visibly excited. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Nizu asked. Yes, I can increase the amount of power in one for all, Izuku confirmed. And given the nature one for all's energy, I can use the energy in multiple projects. And due to how friendly one for all's energy is with organic matter, I can even make machines that can be used on humans. Maybe I could save people from some serious injuries or diseases. That's great. All Might cheered. Indeed, that is fantastic news. Nisa's tone did not match his words, leading Izuku to believe that there was a but coming. But I believe for now you should focus on fully figuring out how one for all works before we move on with any projects. Why? Izuku asked. I think I have enough of an understanding to dash. We can't approach this with only enough of an understanding. We need to have a complete understanding of what we are dealing with before we do anything important or dangerous. Nisa interrupted. If we can get a full understanding of what we are dealing with, then we need to take that opportunity. When it comes to something this powerful and important, then we need to take steps to make sure we don't have any more incidents. Because the next time something explodes, you may not be as lucky as you were last time. There was a short pause as what Nisa said sunk in. Now, is that all you wanted to show us, Midoriya? Nizu asked. Yes, sir, Izuka said. Good. You've made good progress, Midoriya. Please learn more about One for All and then report back to me. Nisa said. Yes, sir, Izuka repeated. Also, Shipment C has arrived. Nizu announced. Izuka cringed. He personally hated this project in particular. It wasn't that he hated the thought of bringing back the dead. It's the fact that he wasn't bringing back the dead, but rather making replicas of them is what he hated. What's worse is just how desperate some of the government officials were to have their loved ones returned to them. Even after he told them that he couldn't restore the ones without intact the brains, they just handed him a list of personality traits and memories that they knew that loved one to have and sent him on his way, fully disregarding the fact that what they gave him was not enough to make a full android. Izuka sighed. Even so, I need to start production. When I get the bodies, I can just get them into the automatic system and I don't have to look at them again. Just need to start production. Thank you, sir. I'll begin production as soon as I can, Izuka said. What's Shipment C? All Might asked. Nothing you need to be concerned about. Nizu dismissed. Now, Izuka, I have one last thing to inform you of. Izuka gained a curious expression. What? It's about a contest to see who would be your assistant, Nizu said. A winner has been selected and they will be seeing you tomorrow. Oh, I see. Izuka said. Well, it would be nice to have some help with the school's projects. They do have a bit of an eccentric personality. Are you sure you can handle it? Nizu asked. Well, I've handled Kaken for all these years. I'm sure whoever this person is can't be too bad. Izuka said. Right? The next day. Wrong. Izuka was wrong. Very, very wrong. When he came back to the lab the next morning, he found a girl sleeping on the floor of his lab. Oh, good morning, Midoriya, Nizu said, walking up behind the young scientist. Yes, sir. What is this? Izuku asked him, going up to inspect the girl on the floor. Wait a minute. I know this girl. Suddenly the girl yawned and began to open her eyes. Wow! Midoriya. The girl known as Mei Hatsum shouted, immediately getting to her feet and looking at Izuku's new arms. Those arms are amazing. And they don't seem to require any manual controls either. As Mei gushed over Izuku's robotic appendages, Nizu and Izuku spoke. I see you are familiar with. Nizu said. Good, after all, she's your new assistant. Her? Izuka shouted. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. When we talked, she was so passionate about making things, and she did show a level of understanding that far exceeds that of most people our age. Well, I guess it's fine, she seems she's straddling my arms. Izuka suddenly shouted. Mei had begun trying to take a closer at the arms and started climbing on them, putting her in a very provocative position. Suddenly that arm began to malfunction, whipping around until it eventually sent Mei flying off. Ouch! Mei said as she landed on her butt. Man, those things are strong. How much can they lift? What's their grip strength? I'm sure that having Hatsum here will teach you both very important lessons. After all, you do need some more exposure to the opposite gender besides your mother and daughter. Nizu said. This will be especially effective considering that she will also be living here. What? Izuka shouted in shock. Yeah, I got here early to unpack my stuff. Mei said, gesturing to a mattress on the floor with a toolbox next to it. Hatsum, we asked you to move into the dorm we set up for you. Not the laboratory. Nizu said. But I want to land on something soft when I pass out. Hatsum protested. How am I supposed to land on my bed when it's not even in the same building? But you didn't even fall on the bed. Izuka pointed out. And why is she moving into the dorm anyway? Well, she asked permission to do so and I thought it was a good idea, Nizu explained. So we got her parents' permission and moved her luggage to the school. Izuku's face was bright red and he was gasping for words. He didn't dislike Mei in the slightest, but she was far too non-caring about her modesty for Izuka's liking. It didn't help that she was incredibly developed for someone their age. But still, I guess it's good to have an assistant as competent as her. Izuka thought. After regaining his composure, Izuka turned to Mei, having his arms put him lower to the ground as to not accidentally look at her chest. "Well, it's a pleasure to work with you," Izuka said, extending his arm for a handshake. "The pleasure is all mine," Mei said eagerly, shaking Izuku's hand. "Also, can you take off your clothes?" Izuka promptly regretted his existence. Niza smiled as he watched Mei try to explain the purely scientific reason she wanted Izuku to strip, all while Izuka tried not to pass out from the sheer amount of blood rushing to his face. While on paper putting these two together may not seem like the best idea, Niza knew better. Firstly, Izuka needed to learn to be around females that weren't related to him or robots. And Mei needed to learn modesty and restraint. After dealing with Mei, any other woman would be easy to handle with the possible exception of Midnight. And Mei would eventually learn that if she wanted to get anything out of Izuku, then she would need to stop causing him to pass out and thus would need to start changing her behavior. Secondly, both Izuku and Mei tend to neglect their health in favor of work. And while on paper it might sound bad to put those two together as they would only encourage their workaholic behavior, there was one factor that made this work. Izuku was a massive hypocrite. While he didn't care much about his own well-being most of the time, he did care immensely about others. If Mei kept overworking, Izuku would stop her. And if he wanted her to stop working, then he would need to stop working. Plus Inko and Sukue would also help in that effort. All in all, Nizu was happy with this result. Who knows, maybe after learning from each other, these two could one day become something close to normal human beings. Nah, that will probably never happen. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video, and support the original writer. See you in the next video.